Welcome to a Legendarium special about how Gilded Age robber barons showed off their wealth. In this episode, we will learn about the lavish houses, costumes, and dinners of Gilded Age barons. During the Gilded Age, between the end of the Civil War in 1865 and the turn of the century, factories, steel mills, and railroads grew explosively. This made a small class of businessmen incredibly rich. By 1890, the richest 1% of families controlled 51% of the United States property. The richest of the rich became known as the robber barons, whose consuming greed drove them to exploit workers and create powerful monopolies. The term came from medieval nobles who lived along the Rhine River and charged tolls on passing boats. Just as they competed in business, the robber barons tried to outdo one another with their lavish spending. Beyond that, they hungered to become the equals of the ancient aristocratic families on the other side of the Atlantic. Industrialists who did not have early roots in colonial America or belonged to an old money family made up for it by trying to live and look like a European lord. Take, for example, the Vanderbilt family's 250-room mansion on the 8,000-acre Biltmore estate in Asheville, North Carolina. The Vanderbilts leveled 3 separate hills with dynamite and blasting powder to create a flat space to build on. The house included 10 million pounds of limestone. To entertain guests, the mansion included a bowling alley, an indoor pool, and a library with 10,000 books. Biltmore Estate also featured gardens designed by landscape architect and Central Park designer Frederick Law Olmsted, complete with special smoking and gun rooms. Guests warmed themselves at one of the mansion's 65 fireplaces. Another wealthy Gilded Age family, a railroad dynasty called the Garretts, lived in Evergreen, a Baltimore mansion. A second-floor bathroom featured Roman tile mosaics and a bathtub and toilet covered in 23-karat gold leaf. Another Vanderbilt named William built Marble House from 500,000 cubic feet of imported marble. On world travel, such families picked up decorations to show their worldliness. They searched beyond Europe to find Moroccan furniture, Turkish hangings, bowls from the Mount of Olives, and Japanese fans. They took particular pride in owning candelabra previously owned by the King of Bavaria, or statues that once graced the homes of a noble French family. Powerful families sailed once or twice each year to Paris, where fashion houses kept the women's measurements on file and had the latest designer dresses ready for them. Others stopped at Savile Row in London, where tailors made bespoke suits for them from the finest materials. They came back with multiple dresses and wore them at events throughout the years. Newspapers wrote about what these women wore. Some women even coordinated their clothing with the decor of their mansions. Caroline Astor, for example, had a life-sized portrait of herself in her reception hall, dressed in Parisian finery. When guests arrived at her house for a dinner party, she greeted them standing beneath said portrait, dressed in the latest fashion for that year. Gilded Age ladies also used jewelry to flaunt their wealth. A Mrs. Bryce attended a ball wearing a diamond tiara, a pendant of diamonds, and a bracelet and brooch decorated with black pearls and diamonds. I hope she didn't get mugged on the way home. Of course, what good are these houses and clothes if you can't show them off at parties? After Alva Vanderbilt and her husband William moved into their new Fifth Avenue mansion in 1883, they celebrated by inviting 1,000 guests to a little housewarming party. Every attendee had to dress in historical costumes. Guests wore 18th century powdered wigs and commissioned costumes from a French courtier. I wonder if they stopped to contemplate the irony of dressing like French aristocrats on the eve of the French Revolution. One socialite, Kate Strong, wore a taxidermized white cat as a headdress and a skirt made from cats' tails, earning her the nickname Puss. They spent all night at the party while their drivers shivered in the cold. Another socialite, named Cornelia Martin, put on an 1897 ball in which she turned the Waldorf Astoria Hotel into a replica of the Palace of Versailles. Her husband, Bradley Martin, dressed as Louis XV in a suit of brocade, while the hostess dressed as Mary Stuart in a gown embroidered with gold and trimmed with pearls and precious stones. Another guest, named August Belmont, wore a suit of gold inlaid armor valued at $10,000 or $336,000 in modern money. It will surprise none to learn that these giants also indulged themselves at the dining table, which likely made them giant. Dinners included 5 courses or more, where American lords and ladies feasted on Madeira wine, roast duck, braised beef, mutton cutlets, lobster rissoles, and broiled salmon. C.K. Billings once hosted a dinner in which he and his guests ate while on horseback. In an infamous episode, another industrial tycoon invited guests and his guests' dogs to a dinner in which the dogs feasted upon lavish delicacies in gilt brass bowls. Yet perhaps one of the most voracious eaters of the era became railroad magnate Diamond Jim Brady, who wore so much finery that men called him a walking jewelry store. Brady started with a lunch of 2 lobsters, deviled crabs, clams, oysters, and beef, with 2 pies for dessert. That tided him over until late afternoon, when he indulged in a couple of dozen oysters, 6 crabs, and bowls of green turtle soup. He then proceeded to a main course that included 2 whole ducks, 6 or 7 more lobsters, a sirloin steak, vegetables, along with pastries and a 5-pound box of chocolates. A restaurateur who served him recalled that Brady sometimes invited 10 guests to join him and then ate the dinners of those that didn't show up. A restaurant owner called him the best 25 customers I ever had. The super wealthy lived large, but their opulence hid a dark side. The wealth that paid for this came through corrupt business practices. In an age before the regulatory state, tycoons simply got whatever they wanted by greasing the palms of greedy politicians. It also served as a reminder of how huge the income gap became between the powerful few and the many who worked for them. It is worth noting that one tycoon actually handed out cigarettes wrapped in $100 bills and insisted that his guests smoked them. For millions of Americans, that $100 would have easily been 2 or 3 months' pay. Workers also dealt with dangerous working conditions, some even more so than in Europe. Slums became havens of abject poverty and horrifying crime. Some wondered if these industrialists betrayed democracy itself. After all, Americans fought a revolution to free themselves from aristocratic rule. So why did these industrialists act like the aristocrats they'd thrown out a few generations ago? That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.